Chuck Johnson, welcome to the Tokyo Living Podcast.
Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here.
You have a really fascinating story, and I'm looking forward to diving in. Perhaps if you can start by giving the viewers and listeners a bit of background about yourself, where you grew up and how you initially got involved in martial arts.
Okay. I think, the way I got involved in martial arts was the same way a lot of people got involved, with kung fu movies. Okay, so I think I discovered Jackie Chan when I was like, I don't know, 10 years old. And that was my first time realizing that somebody had actually systemized fighting, that this was something that you could learn. And originally I'm from Detroit, which is a little bit on the dangerous side. You know what I mean? And of course I had my childhood bullying experiences and everything else. So naturally, once I discovered that somebody had created systems for fighting and that this was a thing that anybody could learn, I just got really, really obsessed with it. And I would record old Jackie Chan movies on VHS and then sit there and hit the rewind button and play it back and just try to copy it basically until I wore all the tapes out.
Yeah.
And then when I was about 15, my best friend in high school was Korean and he was doing Taekwondo and he suggested I come and do Taekwondo with him. Right. And at that point, I'd already been stretching because I wanted to be able to do the splits because I saw that in the movie. And I thought, okay, if these guys can do that, then that must make them good. So then I should learn how to do this too. So I'd already been stretching for like 3 years.
Yeah.
So by the time I started Taekwondo at 15, I could already do the splits in every direction. And it became the first thing I was ever actually good at. I'd never, I never really took to team sports and I was kind of like a C- average student in school. And then with Taekwondo came confidence. And then with that confidence came better grades in school and everything else. And then after that, I just got super, super into it and started training 6 days a week. And then, within about 2.5 years, I became a, junior Olympic state champion. And then, as with anything, the more you do it, the more you get into it, the better you get, which just increases the passion. You just get into a positive cycle.
Yeah.
So that was how the whole journey began. And then eventually that brought me to Korea for training.
Yeah.
And I trained in Korea for about 3 years.
Okay.
And then from there, what's that?
No, I mean, I'm just a lot of things that you popped up there that obviously share a pretty common story in terms of watching movies and stuff like that. And for me, it was The Karate Kid, and Van Damme was the big one for me. But
oh yeah, The Karate Kid and Van Damme, they were huge back in the day, man. And I think it was very inspirational for a lot of people.
Yeah, and ironically, my neighbors are now Mr. and Mrs. Miyagi, which is one of the most ironic things in my life so far.
That's amazing.
When you were practicing your stretching, I know I went through this phase. Did you try doing the splits between the two chairs? Did you go through that phase?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
Went there.
Yeah, absolutely. I never got it quite where it was flat. I had that weird kind of sagging style. Where because I had the feet turned up, right? So you just get this little U thing instead of I'd have it with the feet flat like this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can get the legs flat.
Yeah.
But that took me years to figure out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a few other things you brought up there. You sort of brushed over it a little bit, but you said that when you started Taekwondo, that your grades went up. Obviously, I'm a martial arts instructor, and I sort of push this as part of one of the reasons why I think that martial arts are so great. And for me, it gave me so much in terms of discipline and hard work and focus and concentration and all those things. Because I found the same thing that I think it really helped me academically. But what was it about Taekwondo for you that you felt helped you succeed more academically as well?
You know what it was, and it's interesting because I think when you look at kids and why kids struggle in school, I think there's never one reason that all kids struggle in school. And one of the most interesting books that I've read that really shed light on that was a book called Happier, that talked about the concept of flow, right? And when you're dealing with the concept of flow, basically what the book was saying is that happiness exists on a vector between difficulty and skill level, right? Or flow exists on a vector between difficulty and skill level, meaning that if something is too easy, then you can't enjoy it because you get bored. You can't actually focus. If it's too hard, you can't enjoy it because you get frustrated and you can't focus. right? So happiness comes at the point where it's just hard enough that if you really, really, really focus, you can pull it off.
Yeah.
And like that's when you get that complete concentration where like you lose sense of time and everything
Mm,
else, right? And
mm,
from that point of flow is where happiness stems from, right? Or this feeling that like you're fighting for something but you're winning,
yeah.
right? Like that's when you're happy. You're not actually the happiest after you've won. You're happiest when you're fighting for it but you're winning, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And anyway, what this came out to, the reason that Taekwondo made a big difference in for me academically was because I was doing it every day after school. That cut down the time that I had to study. So it put pressure on. So I was like, oh, okay, well, now I've only got 3 hours to get all my studying done. So as soon as I got home, I would get home and I would just focus, because if I don't get it done, I can't go to train, So basically the reason I wasn't performing well in school was because basically it was too easy.
Yeah.
It wasn't that it was too hard, it was too easy.
Yeah.
So having a regular training schedule made me force all of my studying into a small amount of time. And then through that's when I started to really focus on my studying. And that's when I really started to excel. And that's when I learned how that's how I learned how to focus and study.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then from there, I realized that for myself, what I need is just a lot of challenge. Like I can't perform if it's not extremely hard. When it's extremely hard, that's when I can zero in. But if it's too easy, I can't focus, and then I just don't perform well. So, and that led me down a lot of different really interesting paths in my life. Maybe some good and some not so good. But
Yeah.
that was the big thing that I actually figured out from doing Taekwondo.
Wow, that's actually a really interesting take on it. I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How soon did you get into the competitive side? Because me, like most martial artists, I never got into karate to be a champion. But as soon as I started, I realized that there was this really enjoyable and challenging sport behind it. How quickly did you get into that side of things?
The interesting thing about that is that I always thought I wasn't good at sports. Like I just thought, because I mean, I tried basketball and like a few other things, and what I realized is that it's not that I wasn't good at sports, is that as a person, I'm outgoing, but I'm outgoing, but I was shy at the same time. You know what I mean? So if you can understand that. And what I realized is I needed something that I could do at my own pace, in my own way. And if I found that, then I could exceed. Right. So with Taekwondo, the thing about Taekwondo tournaments is that you fight alone, obviously. Right. Right. And then when you compete in forms, you do that, on your own. So I started doing forms, or I started competing more or less, not just because the option was there. And then, I did my first tournament as a green belt, and I won first place for forms as a green belt. I didn't win anything for sparring. I didn't win my first sparring match until I was like a red belt. Right. Basically because I was just way too nice, like I didn't know how to go hard. It just that didn't suit my character. But that was the first, when I got that trophy as a green belt, that was the first time I'd ever won anything. Right. So then it became exciting because like, oh my God, I just won something. I'd never won anything before. So then I got super, super into it. Right. And then I thought, okay, well, if I could win at forms, I wonder if I could win at sparring too. And then I just kept pressing until I won a sparring. And then I was like, okay, I won a forms and sparring. I wonder if I could win at board breaking. So then I just got into competing on board breaking as well. And that was, I feel like that's a little bit of a different generation. And I mean, you could give me your take on it, Sam, but I kind of feel like with the kids that I teach now, people aren't as hungry for the competition side of it. And it may just be the particular, like, it may be Taekwondo, or that may be just the the environment that I'm in or whatever. But I don't see that same kind of hunger and the same number of kids, as because before it used to be like all about that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely in the environment that I'm in, and I guess it's similar. Like, the kids, whether they're in it because of the fascination of the martial arts and not really hooked on the sport as much, or whether it's maybe the parental pressure that the parents want them to do martial arts, or they see that being in Japan and wanting to do karate while they're in Japan from an English-speaking instructor is a great opportunity, and they're sort of pushing it. Where I started karate wasn't there wasn't a massive focus on the sports side. There was some focus. It was a strong focus, but when I've been in the Japanese, especially in my organization in Shinkyukushin, it's a massive sports focus. It's very much about the sports side. So I definitely see, when I look at the Japanese students that are in our organization, that they are very hungry. They are that they are keen to succeed and be successful in competition. But with the kids that I'm teaching, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think so. So
yeah,
it's interesting, and I wonder if some of that has to do with simply the fact that how education is itself has changed, right? And like how parenting itself has changed and evolved over decades. That's just given people just a different kind of mindset. So because I know, even speaking at like 10 years ago or so, I went back and I visited my one of my old coach at Michigan State, and he'd even mentioned, like, it used to be that as soon as people got into Taekwondo, they wanted to fight. Everybody wanted to fight. And now people, they want to come, they want to train, they want to kick around a little bit, but like, it's harder to find people that really want to go for it, and they want to go hard in the ring anymore. So,
it's interesting. Some may argue that there's just too many participation awards being given out these days, and not that focus on winning. So where did you take it from there? Like, you obviously got to a very, very high level in competition. When did you really start to focus on being at that elite level, and how long did you compete for? And where did the whole career experience come into that?
I competed up until the last competitions I fought were actually, the last ones were here in Japan. So I competed all the way up until my first few years in Japan.
Okay.
And all in all, I'd say I did maybe 40 tournaments or so. So the highest I had gone was a non-Olympic qualifying national champion. So I mean, just to give you some insight into how Taekwondo competition works, there's a lot of different organizations of Taekwondo, right? But the ultimate, quote unquote, is going to the Olympics, obviously, right? So then you have your Olympic qualifying national championships, and then the non-Olympic qualifying national championships. And then after the national championships, then you have the team trial competitions and things like that, right? So I went as far as being a non-Olympic qualifying national champion. So partially because I didn't know it at the time when I started off to do this, but becoming an Olympian is an extremely expensive thing. It's very, very, very costly, and you have to have sponsors and all this other thing. And I just didn't know any of that. I just went to Korea by myself to just train and get as good as I can. But at the same time, when I was training in Korea, I would train 2 or 3 times a week because I had to work, whereas the guys that I was training with, that's all they did 6 days a week, 6 days a week, 6 hours a day, was just fight. Right. And those are the kinds of people that you're going up against. Right. So, that being the case, when I was about 23 or so, like I said, I'd already won 2 non-Olympic qualifying championships. And I thought, okay, well, at this point, I'm 23, 24. And if I'm really, really going to do this, if I'm going to go all the way, quote unquote, then I need to let go of everything else. This can be the only thing. And then I stopped to think about that. And because I'd gone to Korea, for training, I had experienced my first foreign country. I started, learning my first foreign language while I was in Asia, out here in Thailand, and I was beginning to discover the world, And then I thought, okay, now I know there's this big, huge world out there with different cultures and different languages and different living experiences. And do I really want to be, in my 30s, and the only thing I know is Taekwondo? And the answer was no.
Mm.
And that was a really hard decision to make because I put so many years into it and blood and sweat and tears and everything. But I thought the world is too big to only know this one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that being the case, I thought, well, okay, because of the Taekwondo training, I'd lived in Korea and I'd lived in China as well. Because I went to Hong Kong and then I was the intercollegiate champion of Hong Kong as well.
Okay.
Which was that one was an interesting story because I only went to the tournament to watch and then I ended up winning it. So somebody just recognized me from a textbook in the audience. And they're like, "This is the guy in the textbook."
Oh,
And then
really?
then the heavyweights they were short fighters. So they said, "You're a heavyweight. Can you fight today?" And I was like, "I don't even have a uniform." They're like, "Well, if we get you a uniform, can you fight?" And I was like, "All right." So then I
Oh, wow.
jumped in and I fought, and I ended up becoming a heavyweight champion of Hong Kong. Um, yeah,
Wow.
but anyway, that's a whole nother story. But so I had this living experience in Korea and in China, and then I thought, and basically all of my perceptions of Asia was based on the Korean perspective and the Chinese perspective, and their perspective on Japan wasn't necessarily positive,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? For obvious historical reasons, right? But
Mm.
my older brother, my older brother did kendo, and he loved Japan, and he was training in Japan. So I
Okay.
thought, well, I mean, it can't be that bad of a place because my brother likes it, right?
Yeah.
So why don't I go and then, since I've got all this Asian experience anyway, I'll just go to Japan and then teach English for a year, save up money, go to university, go get a PhD or something, and then just experience Japan, so that I can wrap up my tour of Asia with a whole perspective on what Asia is.
Mm.
And that idea is what brought me to Japan. And then
Yeah.
I came here, and then you come to Tokyo, and there's just a million and one opportunities to do everything all over the place.
Yeah.
And that was just the beginning of the action film career and the bodyguarding career and everything else.
Yeah. Wow. And when was that? When did you come to Japan?
I came in, I think, 2001.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, so that
So a
was
bit
about
of a
20 years ago. Yeah.
wow. Yeah. And I mean, you talked about how hard it was to sort of make that decision to pull away from elite competition. I mean, I guess that's been like 20 years since you sort of retired from. How does that sort of? Did you think about it now? I mean, for me, that was a really difficult process. I sort of competed through until I was 30, but and it was really my body was sort of just giving way, and it's completely given way since then. It's the case
I
with
know
most
that feeling.
athletes, and also just mentally, I didn't think I had it in me anymore. But it's such a hard decision, and I think as an athlete, it's part of your identity. You identify as an athlete, and
Yeah.
giving that up, you can sometimes just feel a little bit lost. And I know that's what I went through anyway.
And it's hard too because like in your mind you still know how to do everything, right?
Yeah,
It's just your body just won't do that anymore.
yeah,
Right? Your
yeah,
body's just like, nope, you can go ahead and try, but I'm just not gonna let you do that. Or you
yeah,
can try, but you're gonna hurt yourself.
exactly.
But in your mind, you still know exactly how to do everything, like all the crazy kicking combinations. It's still the knowledge is still there. Your body just won't do it as well. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I mean, yeah, that's every time because I still spar
Hmm.
sometimes, and then every time I spar, I still get that feeling, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And you just get that little bit of an adrenaline rush, and like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't as a fighter, I don't think you'll ever not miss it.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's it's like when you lose a loved one, right? Like they're
Uh,
gone, but you never stop missing them, right?
yeah,
And like
yeah,
you know, retiring from competitions like that.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
like it's always there. It's always in the back of your mind. You always miss it, but you just move on with your life,
yeah,
right? It's kind of the way that I feel about it, and now it's just about doing new things and having new experiences with martial arts, and you know, the exciting thing for me now is taking all these things that I've learned and then just giving it to other people.
yeah,
Like
sure.
I think that's cool and that's fun and that's exciting too, and seeing how they grow and develop, and especially with like the kids, right?
Mm,
When you see kids overcoming these struggles through your training, like it's beautiful, man.
for sure.
you know
So yeah, when you first came to Japan, what were you doing work wise, and how did that sort of lead into the stuff that all the different stuff that you've done over the last 20 years?
Okay, so when I first got here, I was teaching English, but for the years that I was in Korea, basically, I spent years not really working.
Mm.
So, and with that comes debt, and I just naturally, because like I said, I didn't have a sponsor or anything, so I just built up this debt. So the idea was to come here to teach English and then to start paying off debt,
Mm.
right? But when I came here, I was doing that, but there was also, in order to do it faster, I was looking for more that I could do.
Mm.
And then one thing that happened is when I got my job, which was teaching English at Eon, the big English school chain. One of the students there, he looked at me on the first day and he's like, "You look really strong. What do you do?" And then I said, "Oh, I'm a Taekwondo guy." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool. I'm a Taekwondo guy too. We should go fight." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, let's go fight," because that's what you do when you meet other martial artists, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
absolutely.
let's go have a battle to the let's go have a battle to the death and see who wins, right? So then I fought him, and then he's like, "You're really strong. You should work with me." And I said, "Okay, well, what do you do?" And he said, "I'm a bodyguard, and I work for Hollywood celebrities when they come here." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds interesting." So then I got into bodyguarding, and I became a bodyguard for visiting Hollywood celebrities, largely because, I was an American who was based in Japan. So I knew Japanese stuff, but I could relate to them as an American. And I
Mm.
could talk to their security teams as an American. So there was no cultural barrier and no
Mm.
language barrier. So that got me into security. And then I was doing personal security for, I was just doing it like just every so often, but I still wanted to make more, right?
Mm.
So I was trying to pay off debt. So then a friend was like, "Well, you're pretty muscular. You should try modeling."
Mm.
So I was like, "All right, well, what have I got to lose? Let me try." So I walked into an agency, and then it was IMO at the time, right? So I walked into IMO, and then I said, "All right, yeah, so like I want to model. Like, what do I do?" And then they said, "Okay, well, what are you good at?" And I said, "I'm good at martial arts." And then they said, "Are you really good?" And I said, "Well, I'm a national champion." And they said, "Okay, well, we're casting for a Godzilla movie right now. We want martial arts champions to play martial arts extras. You know, um, so why don't we submit you?" And I was like, "Okay, let's try." And then they said, "Do you have any photos?" And I said, "No." So then like I just took my shirt off and went outside and like, you know, just I got one flying sidekick photo. And they were like, there's like a wedding happening in the background, like outside. But I got one photo that was good, and they said, "Well, they closed casting an hour ago, so we'll just go ahead and submit it." And then they submitted it, and the casting director said, "Man, he looks good. Send him in." So then they sent it in, and then I auditioned, and then I got into the film.
Wow.
And then while I was on set, I was like, "This action movie stuff's awesome. How do I keep doing this?" I said to one of the stunt guys, and he said, "Well, go talk to that guy." And then that guy was an action director named Yuji Shimomura, who's at the time he was up and coming. Now he's one of the top 3 in Japan.
Oh wow.
So then I just met him, and then I showed him what I could do, and he's like, "Why don't you just come and just practice with my guys, with my team?" And I said, "Okay." So then I just showed up and I started training with his guys, but I didn't speak Japanese, so I couldn't understand anything. So then I thought, okay, well, this is good, but maybe I should study this stuff in English. So
Mm.
then, you know, when I could have breaks from work, I started going back to the States to study stage combat, which is the theatrical side, because that's all I could find was stage combat training. So then I got into studying like Western weapons and
Wow.
like rapier and broadsword and
Mm.
theatrical combat, right?
Where did you study that? Just out of interest, and what sort of people were teaching it? Was it just
Yeah, so I studied with an organization called the Society of American Fight Directors.
Mm.
I did a web search for this stuff, and
Yeah.
then they have workshops and things just all over, actually all over the States, all over Canada, all over Australia, New Zealand.
Mm.
These there's dueling arts, there's the Society of American Fight Directors, there's the International Order of the Pin and the Sword. There's a lot of different ones.
Mm.
So then I started studying with them, and then while I was studying with them, I met the owner of the United Stuntmen's Association's International Stunt School. And he said, "Well, if you really want to do stunts for film, you need to study stunts for film. So why don't you come and train at my school?" So I said, "Okay, how much is your school? And where is it?" And he said, "It's in Seattle. It's in the summer." And then I looked into it and it was like $6,000, and I didn't have that. So basically, the credit card that I had was already maxed out. So I got another credit card and I maxed that one out to apply for the stunt school. So then I just went to the stunt school, graduated from the stunt school, and then when I came back, that training got me into doing motion capture for Metal Gear Solid 5 for a year, which is my first really big job.
Yeah.
And then that's how I got into doing motion capture. And then because I knew how to properly move, at the time there were no foreigners here who could do fight choreography well, or who had actually formally studied it and formally learned it. And because I had learned from Shimamura-san, who's very, very good, and I knew because I had studied it in English, I had a sense of what fight choreography is and how it's supposed to be done. So then there started being these Japanese, stunt coordinators who were like, oh, there's a guy that can do it, and he's really big, and like he's really big and he's muscular. It's great. So then I spent about maybe 3 years before I got, another job. And then I got that other job for a film called Death Trance. And then everybody saw Death Trance and they're like, who's this guy? So then all these other coordinators started calling me. And then all of a sudden it was a thing. I was the foreigner that could do fight choreography well.
Okay.
And that became the beginning of everything that I do now.
So how many like movies and things have you done so far? Like
at this point, I've done over 100.
Wow.
So counting, films, TV shows, commercials. I mainly work here in Japan, but I've also worked in the States. I've worked in Thailand. I've worked in the Philippines. But mainly just here.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think it's a little over 100. And now I'm actually producing films.
Yeah. So how did that come apart? How did that come about? And how did you go about sort of setting up your own company?
Okay, so there's a few different things that happened at once. One is that my son was born, which was amazing. But I was like, okay, I have a child now. I need to be financially responsible. Okay, so I need to have some kind of a stable income because I have a child to feed now. So that planted the first seed of having some kind of a company. And then at the same time that happened, two other things that happened. One is because I had all this martial arts experience, I didn't have any kind of a dojo. So then I just thought, well, I need to share this stuff with people because I just know a lot. So I just started teaching martial arts on YouTube. I started a show called How to Defeat Dudes.
Oh, really?
Because I had a friend who was a Hollywood producer who had gotten assaulted and mugged in the Philippines. And he said he started watching self-defense tutorials on YouTube. And he said it was all these guys in camouflage pants using words that he didn't understand, talking about things that were way too hard for him. So he said, I think you should make a show that's self-defense for normal people, just normal people. Right. And you can make it lighthearted or whatever else. So why don't you try? And if you try, maybe I'll fund it. So I thought, okay, I'll try. And then he didn't fund it at the end of the day, but the show ended up being a thing. And then I ended up with a channel that was growing by like 1,600% because people just liked the content. So I was just trying to just be honest and objective and just real with people. And people always appreciate sincerity, right? So because the YouTube channel had grown so much, the YouTube studio had just opened up in Japan, and they said, YouTube Japan is still very, very small, but we want to grow it. We want to do YouTube Red to compete with, Amazon Prime and Netflix. We want to show we can do dramatic content too. And since you're one of the very few Japanese YouTubers with, a channel that's actively growing, we'd like you to give you the opportunity to make a film. And I was like, okay. And then they said, we're going to take 10 applicants. Out of those applicants, the top 3 will give them full access to Toei Studios with transportation and costumes and everything. So then I wrote a story. And the story was called Fist of Absinthe. And it was about, a samurai-obsessed foreigner who drinks absinthe and then hallucinates that he's in ancient Japan and he has to defend his sneakers from samurai ninjas. And that was a story. And then they took the story. It got in to be one of the top 3, so I had full access to Toei. Then because I had Toei and I had Google, I went to Adidas and I said, hey, listen, I'm making this story about, a guy in Japan who wants to defend his sneakers against samurai. Do you guys have any sneakers that you want to promote? And then can I have money? And then Adidas said, no, you cannot have money because you're a nobody and we don't know you, but we will give you and your stunt team sneakers, and then we'll promote it on our social media. So then I was like, all right, I'll take the sneakers. So then
Yeah.
like I got me and a bunch of guys sneakers. And then at the same time this was happening, some of my students from, because at this point I had that stunt school that I graduated from, I'd gone back and I'd started working as the fight choreography instructor because I had so much fight choreography experience. So then some of those guys from that school said, hey, we want to come and train with you in Japan. And I said, okay, well, fine, come train. So then at the same time this YouTube thing was happening, I had a group of guys come from the States and from Canada. So then all of a sudden I had a stunt team too. So then I was making a movie and I had a stunt team at the same time. So then basically I just made both of them. And then it was absolute chaos because literally my child was born while I was making this film.
Wow.
And I was doing a theater show at the same time. So it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. But it all worked out. The film did really, really well. It's actually, we ended up getting distribution on TBS digital distribution, and then the main song got onto iTunes for a little while and everything else. And then that was the beginning of what I have now, which is Quiet Flame Productions. That was my first film, and then that was the beginning of the stunt team. And at this point, a lot due to COVID, I don't, have a stunt team anymore.
Mm.
A lot of people just went home, and a lot of people just had to quit doing fight court, pursuing entertainment because they just had bills to pay.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So now what Quiet Flame is it's a film production company, and it's also an actors training institution. So what I do is I take actors and then we train them in all these different kinds of physical movement. We do fight
Mm.
choreography, we do Western weaponry, we do Japanese weaponry, we do Southeast Asian martial arts, we do like Filipino Kali and Eskrima and Silat and things like that. And we give them training in all these different kinds of physical movement to increase their physicality on screen,
Mm.
and to give actors the ability to do all their own fight choreography, which
Mm.
just makes them, more marketable and easier for them to sell in their own careers.
Yeah.
And then conversely, the other thing I do is I take, you know, Western stunt people, and then, we give them training in classical martial arts,
Okay.
because a lot of stunt people, a lot of the people that actually do martial arts from film have never studied any martial arts at all. A lot of them are gymnasts or they're dancers,
Okay.
right? And because of that, you can kind of tell when you watch them move, right? Because their hip alignment isn't quite right, or
Mhm.
um, sometimes what you see in terms of choreography doesn't necessarily make sense. And it's because a lot of the guys that do this, they have no real martial arts training whatsoever.
Mm.
So basically, I take these guys, and then we give them training in classical martial arts as people that can already move, right? So then, as anytime you get people training in martial arts, you get more disciplined people,
Yes.
more disciplined people, more focused people, which at the end of the day makes them better performers as well.
Mm.
So now QF kind of focuses on these two groups. And then beyond that, I also have, these Taekwondo schools for kids. I've got, my main dojang, it's right in Roppongi, right down the street from yours.
Yep.
And then I have a little program for the Tokyo American Club, and then a little program for Shinagawa International Schools.
Okay.
And that's everything we do.
You said that your dojo is in Roppongi. Where exactly? Whereabouts is it?
Basically, it's right at Roppongi Crossing. You just can't see it from the street.
Right. Mm.
So it's right there's like a Hoshino Coffee, and it's the door next to that.
Okay.
So it's just right there. You just can't see it from the street. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Very
yeah.
cool.
So,
And just out of interest, the name Quiet Flame, where does that come from?
that came from. So I feel like there's, okay, if you look at a fire, right? Like, you know, fire can, it can feed you, it can provide warmth. It can create community because people will gather around a fire to talk, right? So there's all these wonderful things that can come with fire as long as it's controlled and balanced,
Mm.
right? So, but when it gets out of balance, is when it becomes dangerous, and that's when like fire burns your house down, or it can burn forests down, or it can cause physical injury and everything else, right? So,
Mm.
my own personal martial arts philosophy is to be the quiet and controlled flame,
Yeah.
right? To be the kind of fire that people can come and warm themselves around, but not the kind of fire that burns people,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I try to teach, and I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like as martial artists, we all have a certain responsibility towards the betterment of society because we know how to be better people ourselves,
Mm.
right? So, we have this responsibility to also create better people,
Mm.
right? So, and I think that's more than anything, that's what I'm trying to do with Quiet Flame. I create better actors, create better stunt people, and then, create kids that do better in their lives and that face their struggles better. Yeah.
Mm. Beautiful.
So, and that's what, yeah, and that's what the name represents.
Yeah, I love it.
Let me ask you, Sam, how about Club 360? Why Club 360?
Yeah, we it was a name that we were floating around pretty early, and it's the only one that really stuck. It's basically just that whole holistic approach to health and wellness, that we're looking at all the different facets, the rehabilitation side, sports performance, and also the psychological side of health, and trying to integrate that as much as possible. And just within our facility, there's we sort of see people go on a fitness journey where people will start to get more active, and as they get more active, usually that results in overall better health outcomes. But if someone does too much too quickly, or if they're being active on top of some underlying condition, they might start to develop a pain experience, and then we have the physios to address that and try and identify why that's occurring, and then try to work them back into the fitness side. So that's that sort of holistic nature that is behind the name 360.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And we're also open 360 days a year. We're closed on Christmas Day, and then I think for 4 or 5 days over New Year's. So.
Oh, okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to stopping in and seeing your place and everything real soon, man.
Yeah, you should. And so you're teaching Taekwondo at your dojo and at TAC as well. Do you teach any of the stunt choreography to sort of people that are just interested, like the Ippancha, that are just interested in learning a little bit about that are actually not in the industry?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And do you have like separate programs for that?
No, I have the people that just want to do it. Like I just have them train right along the stunt guys.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. As Bruce Lee said, I teach whoever wants to learn.
Awesome. And kids as
Plain and
well, that
simple.
sort of stuff?
The stunt stuff, I do have one kids action program at the American Club.
Okay.
But that program only exists at the American Club.
Yeah.
So I don't have a kids action program outside of that.
Yeah.
Largely because I feel like there's only one of me. Yeah. So there's only so many hours.
Tell me about it.
I mean, Sam, how old are you now?
I'm just turned 23.
Oh my goodness.
I'm 41.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, wow, yeah. Okay, I'm 44. Okay. So we're both in that 40s grind, right? So yes. Yeah, I mean, there's only, I think, as martial artists of this age, it's all about efficiency. Yeah. Right. Sure. And you got to save your body in the ways that you can save it, and you just can't overdo it at this age, right?
No,
so
absolutely.
Basically, I would love to do more, but in terms of teaching, there's only so much that I can do. So yeah. I drew the limit. The 3 Taekwondo programs that I have, those will probably be, the only 3 kids Taekwondo programs I have. I don't plan on expanding into other programs. I mean, you never know, but that's not in the plan. And then the programs that I have as well are just, this is enough right now, that I can, still spend time with my family and everything else. So yeah. The only thing I'm really pushing at right now is film production.
Yeah. And that was going to be my next question. I mean, now that it feels like we're sort of moving out of the strong restrictions of the pandemic, have you got any sort of future plans with Quiet Flame and with the production, and where are you looking at taking that in the future?
What we're doing right now is we're gearing up to produce our first feature film. Awesome. Which is just a ginormous mountain to climb. Everybody said, like, be careful, man. Features are hard. but it's like, it's one of those things where like people tell you that parenting is hard,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you don't know until you do it. And you're like, whoa, this is like
Won't
1,000
be hard
times
for
harder.
me.
Yeah. Exactly, right. And it's the same with making a feature, man. Like, it's saying it's hard is an understatement. It's just the jump between short and feature is just a massive, massive jump.
Yeah.
And that's one that I'm navigating right now.
Mm.
But so far, we're close to having enough funding to get the film greenlit.
Okay.
And then after that, if we can, we're going to shoot it in spring of next year.
Oh wow.
And then we've got our first feature under our belt.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Interesting.
yeah.
Are you able to disclose any of the details about the rough plot or what sort of movie
Yeah,
this will
sure.
be?
So it's the film is called Eastbound Traffic,
Okay.
and what it's about is, okay, so backing up, there was a time in my career where I had transitioned out of English teaching, and I didn't have any kind of a stable income. And again, a friend was like, "Well, you're pretty ripped. You should try stripping." So then I was like, "All right." as I said with everything, I'm like, "All right, well, let's try." So I went, and then I got into working as a stripper, which was the craziest thing ever because I'm not like the exotic dancer type at all. Like, I don't dance, but I got into it. And then I was working at this really kind of shady little club in Saitama. And I kept seeing things. You see girls coming with like huge bruises that they have to put like tights over to cover. Or you'd be like, well, whatever happened to such and such? Where'd she go? And everybody's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't know? Where'd she go? And nobody knows what happened to this person. And I kept seeing stuff like that, right? So, come to look back on it, I thought like that was my first taste of seeing what I believed to be sex trafficking with my own eyes, right?
Mm.
Because you would have these girls come in, and then somebody would say, oh, well, let me just hold your passport until we get your visa. But that's not how it works, right? Like, you get the visa before you come in. And then
Mm.
they would just hold the passport, and then the passport would, then their tourist visa would expire. And then they'd be like, okay, well, now you're here illegally. What are you going to do? Do you want to go to jail, or you want to keep working? So there was like these kinds of things that were just happening. So as a function of being through that, I always thought that if I could get to a point where I could tell these people's story, especially the story of these women, I really wanted to.
Mm.
So I wrote a story called Eastbound Traffic about it. This is actually my third time trying to produce this as a film. The first two times I just didn't have enough production experience. I just didn't know enough about how to make movies properly to do it well.
Mm.
So this is my third time trying to do it. And this time what I did is, in addition to, my own personal experience, I got two other actors who had lived through the sex industry themselves, one transgender, and then one, a Russian girl who had had a family member that had raised her that had been through it. Right.
Okay.
So then I rewrote the film, putting all of our real life experiences into this piece, right? So basically the story, it's a completely fictional story, but it's inspired by the experiences of the three people that are in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Amazing.
and yeah, so I mean, if I can say so without tooting my own horn, it's a story I've been working on for 8 years. So it's just an incredible story, and I wanted to get into a lot of what the underbelly of Japan looks like. Because whenever you see films about Japan, it's always really like glitzy glammy and
Yeah.
like neon lights and cute characters. But I mean, as well as I do that that isn't a whole picture of Japan.
Mm.
So kind of what I wanted to show was what the underside of it looks like.
Yeah.
Because this is the thing that really happens to people, and sex trafficking is happening everywhere in the world.
Mm.
Anywhere there's a big city, and not even big cities, even in small towns, right? Like, this is something that's happening to children and to women and to trans people and to people everywhere. So,
Yeah.
if the point of all this, if the point of Quiet Flame is to create betterness in the world, then I thought that, as a film production company, our focus also needs to be on addressing real social issues.
Mm.
So basically what I want to do with this is, you know, our first feature of that sort. but you know, what I want to do is use action cinema as a way to address social issues.
Yeah.
Because whenever you watch documentaries, docs are great and they're fantastic, but they're also kind of preaching to the choir.
Yes.
Because you have to be interested in the topic to watch the doc, right?
Mm.
Whereas everybody likes watching people fight, and
Yeah.
everybody likes watching people get blown up, right? So if you put, you know, social commentary into that context, you're going to reach a lot more people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the film production side of Quiet Flame is about. And I made a short film called Almost There a few months ago. And that was my first test of this concept. And what that was basically it was a visual representation of the journey of immigrants and refugees as told through fight choreography.
Okay.
Which is, you know, just not necessarily an easy thing to do, but I wanted to test this idea of using action for social commentary. And that film's done really, really amazing. I've won first place at a lot of festivals and one had wins at some really big festivals. So to me, that tells me that this idea can work.
Yeah.
Right. And then Eastbound Traffic is going to be our first time trying this on a very big scale.
Amazing.
So yeah, it's very scary because I'm you know, I'm going to be working with more money than I've worked with before, a lot more. And that's, you know, that's intimidating. Right.
Yeah.
And you know what it's kind of like making a feature? It's kind of like building a ship from the ground up that you're about to sail across the world, right? When you've never built a ship before, right? So you're like, okay, I want to sail across the world. I have to build my own boat that can survive this journey, right? And you're just building it from the ground up, and you're, you know, you're pulling in, okay, this builder's good at this, so I'm going to use this guy. This builder's good at this, so I'm going to use this guy. You know, and then you just have to create this entire thing, and then you have to sail it, right? And that's kind of what it's like.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like I said, off the top, you've got an incredible story, and it's amazing to hear all the stuff that you've done. If people are interested in finding out a little bit more about you, first of all, I mean, where can people watch Almost There?
Okay. The easiest, it's on YouTube.
YouTube, perfect.
Yeah, my YouTube channel is just Chuck Johnson.
Yep.
Or you can go to Quiet Flame Productions YouTube,
Okay.
and it's on either of those channels if you want to check it out.
Yep. And do you have a website, and are you active on socials?
Yep, I do. So the website's real easy. It's just quietflame.org.
Okay. Perfect.
And then I've got pages for all of the different films that I've produced so far on quietflame.org. So.
Okay. Perfect. And then on social media, are you active on Instagram or Twitter or?
Yep. Yeah, I'm on Insta as well. It's just Quiet Flame Productions.
Yep.
Or Chuck in Action.
Okay.
Chuck the letter in action.
Perfect.
So, or my two Instas. So
awesome. Well, we'll put all the links to those in the show notes. And yeah, Chuck, thank you so much for coming on today. Like I said, it was awesome to hear your story. And yeah, hopefully we can catch up in person soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. I'd love to. I'd love to stop by and just see your space and just, you know, kind of chop it up in person. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. For sure. Look forward to it.
I think one of the fun things about being in Tokyo is when you meet other Western martial artists here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, because everybody always has such cool training experiences and such cool stories, and I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Chuck. And yes, like I said, we'll look forward to catching up in person soon.
Absolutely.
Cheers, man. Take care.
Thank you, Sam.